Tonight, you'll discover the story of a man who split more than just logs. He split open the illusion that suffering was something permanent. You'll walk beside him beneath vast Amazonian canopies, feel the dew soften your skin, and hear the slow rustle of leaves falling like quiet truths into the soil. The forest is breathing, and in each breath, a lesson waits hidden in bark, in bird call, and in the tired steps of a man who never meant to become a student of the Dharma. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake enough, post your location and the local time in the comments below. I love seeing where and when our little Sangha is listening from. Now, dim the lights for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The forest begins before the village ends, in this forgotten fold of the Brazilian Amazon, where the rivers wind without hurry and the sky always seems on the verge of weeping. A man named João walks barefoot down a leaf-strewn trail. His machete rests across his shoulder, not threatening, just familiar, like an old friend he stopped fearing long ago. João was a woodcutter, but only because that's what his father was, and his father's father before him. There's no mystique to it, just early mornings, aching shoulders, and the smell of wet bark forever embedded in his clothes. He doesn't talk much, not because he is wise, but because he's tired. The kind of tired that isn't just in the body, but in the soul. His wife died 2 monsoons ago. His son moved to the city and forgot how to write letters. The neighbors still nod at him, but they've started calling him the ghost. João doesn't blame them. Each morning, he heads into the forest. Not to seek peace, he doesn't believe in such things, but because trees don't ask questions. Today, the light is odd, muted. The sky is a thick quilt of gray. He's been following an old path he hasn't used since his 20s, back when laughter used to burst from his chest like birds startled into flight. Something about the way the moss hangs heavier today, or the way his breath returns to him in steam, draws him inward. And there, just past a bend, where the forest hums louder, he finds a tree. Not just any tree. A towering sama-uma, or as some call it, the rain tree. Its roots spill like serpents over the earth, as if trying to escape their own depth. The canopy above it is cathedral-like, dripping with lichen and filtered sunlight. He steps beneath it, lays down his axe, and leans against the trunk. It's warmer than he expects, and silent in a way that silences him back. He doesn't know it yet, but this is where the first noble truth will find him. João's first lesson isn't grand. It comes disguised as discomfort. As he sits, his knees begin to ache. His back stings with old cuts from carrying too much, too long. He shifts, but finds no relief. He curses under his breath, and then he notices. The moment he shifts, the pain simply moves elsewhere. He's not solving anything, just relocating discomfort. He laughs, dryly. So this is life? Huh, he mutters. Pain that plays hide and seek. And in that small laugh, something opens, because it's true. The first noble truth isn't about drama. It's not about fire or death or grief. It's just this suffering exists. Suffering in the knees, the spine, in missed letters and quiet houses. Juon finally names what he's been dragging through the forest all these years dukkha. Not because he read it, but because he's breathing it. The forest doesn't clap for him. No applause, no lightning, but the wind shifts. Leaves fall gently into his lap. A howler monkey echoes distantly, like an accidental gong. Juon smiles. He pulls out his lunch, just roasted manioc and dried fish, and eats without rush. For the first time in months, he notices taste, chew after chew. He feels hunger and fullness take turns. Even here, impermanence is in play. And suddenly, memories come of his wife plucking mangoes and laughing at his bad singing, of his son splashing in river water, chasing tadpoles. These things brought joy, and then they passed, just like the ache that just left his knee. Everything shifts. Everything ends. The second noble truth doesn't need to be spoken. It arrives like a vine curling through the undergrowth. Craving causes suffering. And Juon had been craving something fixed a moment. A love. A life that wouldn't slip. But even the river he bathes in isn't the same from one day to the next. He lies back, face toward the green sky. His axe rests beside him, untouched. And here's a small forest fact for you. The Samauma tree is sometimes called the mother of the forest because its roots nourish not just itself, but the soil around it, a giver, a patient teacher. Just like the Buddha once said, teaching not through command, but presence. Juon doesn't know any scripture, but as he closes his eyes, he begins to feel something odd, not peace exactly, but space. Spaciousness between thoughts, between each breath. It's like the tree is holding him, not tightly, just enough so he can soften without fear of falling apart. Rain begins to fall, soft, deliberate droplets, tapping leaf, branch, skin. He doesn't run. He doesn't even flinch. He just listens. Because now, the forest is speaking, and for the first time in years, he's quiet enough to hear it. Rain slips through the canopy in threads of silver, whispering onto Yuon's shoulders, his face, his open palms. He doesn't move. Something inside him is unmoving too, not in stubbornness, but in awe. He feels it clearly now. The aching is still there, but it no longer bites. It hums, and it teaches. The forest around him breathes in sync. Insects buzz with a soft confidence, like monks in morning chant. A parrot shrieks from a distant bough, a single note that echoes and vanishes. Every sound says the same thing, in its own way. You are not separate. Juon leans his head back against the wide trunk of the rain tree. The bark presses gently into his spine, each ridge like the grooves of old hands. He thinks of his father again, how his back used to carry bundles of firewood like a beast of burden, never complaining, never questioning, just working, surviving. He always thought his father was strong. Now he wonders, was he just resigned? As the rain softens, steam begins to rise off the damp earth. A warm breath from the forest's belly. Juon picks up a fallen branch, smooth and light, not worth cutting, not worth keeping. Still, something draws his eyes to its curves, and then without meaning to, he starts carving. His machete moves slower than usual, not the sharp, mindless swings of labor, but the curious shavings of someone discovering form in the formless. The branch curls away into a spiral, a curve, nothing perfect, but not broken. And that's when the third noble truth takes root, not in his mind, but in his hands. Suffering can end. It doesn't mean pain disappears, but something deeper, that pain doesn't have to own you. That suffering, like the curls of wood falling from his blade, can be released, bit by bit, not all at once, but patiently, curiously, like this. A breeze drifts through the grove. The leaves above stir like whispers among old monks. Juon watches a tiny green frog crawl across a slick rock. It stops beside his foot, as if evaluating him. I don't know either, he chuckles. And the frog, obviously the wisest creature in the forest, hops away. Juon's eyes linger on the water collecting in puddles between roots. The reflection shivers slightly, then smooths again. That's the mind, he realizes, stirred by thoughts, then calm again when left alone. He reaches into his satchel and pulls out the only thing he never leaves behind, a small wooden statue of St. Francis, given to him by his mother before she passed. The face is worn down, smoothed by years of handling, prayer, maybe even begging. Juon never really prayed anymore, not since the day his wife fell sick and none of the saints answered. But today, under the rain tree, he isn't praying to anything. He just sits with the statue, and with the silence, and the knowing that all things pass, including doubt. Now, the fourth noble truth doesn't arrive like a beam of golden light or the voice of some jungle god. It comes in the way Juon stretches out his legs, touches his chest, and realizes he's still here, still breathing, still able to choose. There is a path out of suffering, not a road paved in gold, but something softer, walkable, made of moss and intention. He thinks of the old eightfold path, though he can't name all its limbs. He remembers fragments from a book he skimmed long ago, left behind by a French traveler in the village who used to sit by the river meditating. Juon thought she was strange. Now he wonders if she was just awake. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. He can't recite them, but he can feel them now, like stones, underfoot, offering support with each step he chooses to take. And perhaps the right action today is nothing. No swinging, no cutting, just sitting under this tree and letting the forest teach. Here's a little-known forest detail for you. Some tribes in the Amazon call the rain tree the sleeping giant. At dusk, its leaves fold inward, as if the tree itself is resting. Juon doesn't know this, but he can feel it. The air around him shifts again, thicker now, velvet soft. The whole grove seems to exhale. He lies back, arms crossed under his head, looks up. The canopy is darkening. Only a few shards of pale gold make it through. Bats flit between branches. The smell of wet earth is everywhere, thick and grounding. He lets out a breath that seems to have been waiting years to be released, and somewhere deep in his chest, a knot begins to untangle. Not completely, not permanently, but enough to let in a little warmth, a little space. And so, he rests. Night comes softly, like the hush of a kind mother pulling a blanket over a child. Juon doesn't move. He doesn't need to. The rain tree watches over him. The forest wraps around him. And within, for the first time in a long, long while, he isn't haunted by the past or chained by craving for the future. He just is, which, if you ask the Buddha, is more than enough. At some point in the deep stillness of night, Juon wakes not with a start, but as if stirred by something gentler than sound. Perhaps the soft cracking of bark above him, or the rhythm of water dripping steadily onto a broad banana leaf nearby. It's not frightening. It's quiet, the kind of quiet that feels full, not empty. He blinks slowly. The rain has stopped. Mist weaves between roots like soft breath. Moonlight pools on the forest floor, caught in puddles, and in the slick curve of his half-carved branch. His back aches. Of course, his shirt is damp, but none of it feels like a problem. Pain, yes, but suffering, that doesn't seem to be here. For the first time in what feels like lifetimes, Juon notices his own mind and realizes it's no longer fighting. Not the cold, not the past, not the ache in his chest he used to call loneliness. Instead, he feels something like companionship. Not with a person, but with this breath, this soil, this moment. He doesn't need to name it. It simply is. The fire is just embers now. He doesn't need it. The warmth he feels is of another kind entirely. He looks at the wood shavings curled on the ground, the beginnings of the little figure he'd carved. It's nothing impressive, a rounded head, one shoulder higher than the other, no face, but he smiles. It's enough. It's always been enough. He takes the figure and presses it gently into the wet earth beside the rain tree, not to throw it away, but to give it back. Everything borrowed must be returned. And isn't that what karma really means? Not punishment, not cosmic revenge, but return. Every breath in is followed by a breath out. Every action ripples outward and circles back, not because someone's watching, but because that's just the shape of the river. Juon brushes his hands clean on his trousers and stands, Slowly, the forest watches, but there's no spotlight, no applause, just the rustle of a night bird and the shifting of his weight on damp roots. And here's a small but strange thing as he begins to walk away from the rain tree. He does something entirely unexpected. He bows, not in ceremony, not in religion, just acknowledgement of what the tree has been, what it has offered, what it never asked for in return. And then he walks barefoot, slowly, with the patience of one who has nothing urgent to return to. The trail isn't the same, though it hasn't changed. The same bends, the same logs, the same overgrowth. But his eyes are different now. He notices the little things he used to miss the iridescent shimmer of a beetle's shell, the spiraled green of a new fern, the sound of his own soles squelching gently in the mud. Everything speaks, but none of it shouts. And isn't that the nature of wisdom? Not loud declarations, but quiet recognition. He pauses beside a stream and cups the water in both hands. It tastes like nothing, and yet somehow it tastes like home. There are no fireworks, no chorus of angels, just a man sipping from a forest stream, feeling, for the first time in a long while, that he's exactly where he needs to be. He doesn't know where he'll go next. Maybe he'll cut fewer trees. Maybe he'll plant some. Maybe he'll just learn to listen more. To himself, to the forest, to the empty space between thoughts. Because that space, as he's discovered, is where peace waits. And so, Zhuang returns to the village not as a prophet, not as a sage, just as a man with a quieter heart. People still call him the ghost, but now he smiles when they do, because ghosts cling to what they've lost. And Zhuang has learned to let go. Now, as you lie here body heavy, breath slow, mind gently dissolving into softness, remember the quiet Zhuang found beneath the rain tree. Remember the Four Noble Truths, not as lofty ideas, but as soft whispers in your own life. Suffering exists. It has a cause. It can end. There is a path. And remember this, too, the forest didn't change. Zhuang did, and so can you. So, as your breath deepens and the night holds you a little more closely, let's gently let go of the ache, of the questions, of the need to fix or understand. There's nothing to do now. Just rest. Let the rain fall in your dreams, soft and steady. Let the leaves drift, slow and silent. Let your thoughts settle, like mist among roots. And if anything stirs, just listen. The forest will speak again. But for now, it sleeps. And so do you. Just as the last story's final breath dissolved into the night air, the sound of distant rain returns soft, steady, almost shy, and with it, the rustling whisper of leaves that have learned how to fall without regret. The forest does not begin with thunder. It begins with breath. Mist clings low to the undergrowth. And somewhere between vine and root, a pair of tired boots squelch against damp earth. The man wearing them, shirt sweat darken, hands calloused from years of labor, is named Matthias. He is not a monk. He has never studied a scroll, never sat beneath a Bodhi tree. He swings an axe for a living. His shoulders remember every tree he's ever felled. But today, his axe stays strapped to his back. There's something peculiar about this morning. The clouds do not move. The air is thick but unusually gentle, as though the forest has been waiting for him. Matthias doesn't notice. He has one task: to find a rain tree deep enough in the forest where no other cutter dares go. Its trunk is said to be broad enough to sleep inside, and its wood fetches a good price back in town. Each step he takes forward sinks into the mossy path, like time itself, pressing downward. Leaves spiral down, like thoughts shedding their own weight. The deeper Matthias walks, the quieter it gets. Not the silence of nothingness, but the silence that listens. At one point, he pauses beside a slow-moving creek. Its waters curl like a sleeping child's breath. He kneels, cups his hands, and drinks. The taste is cold, almost sweet, cleaner than the well in the village. When he looks up, he sees something odd, a patch of trees where the rain seems to be falling upward. Or rather, it hangs, midair, caught in a breeze that doesn't touch his skin. Matthias blinks, rubs his eyes. Still, the same sight, clearing up ahead, light breaking through in broken strands, and in the center, the rain tree, wide-armed, ancient, roots like curled fingers, holding secrets. It's already shedding its leaves, though the season has just turned. Underneath it, sitting like a fallen stone carved by time, is a figure, a man, or so it seems. The man's robe is simple, a kind of off-white, dust-colored. His eyes are closed, and his breath is nearly invisible. He looks both ancient and newborn, not moving, not waiting. Matthias hesitates. His instincts tell him to back away. Something in him deeper than muscle, deeper than hunger, tells him he is not meant to raise his axe here. Not today. Maybe never again. But he doesn't speak. He simply steps forward and sits down across from the man, the way a child might sit before a fire that has already burned all its anger away. The leaves continue to fall. Each one twirls in silence, then lands with the softness of memory. One drifts onto Matthias's knee. He brushes it off, but slowly, with a kind of reverence he doesn't understand yet. The man finally opens his eyes. They are not mysterious, not glowing. They are simply kind. The kind of eyes that have looked long enough to see through the layers. And then he speaks. "You carry a heavy blade," he says, voice like wind through a hollow log. "But what weight do you carry in your chest?" Matthias tries to answer, but no words come. The man nods, as if silence is the answer he expected. You walk into the forest for wood. The man continues, but the forest has its own gifts. It teaches without books, punishes without cruelty, and waits without growing tired. Matthias looks down at his boots, soaked and sinking into the earth. He thinks of the years so many chopping, dragging, burning. He thinks of the trees he's cut without apology. And yet, he also remembers how each one fell with a sigh, not a scream. "Have you heard?" the man says. "The forest speak of suffering." Matthias frowns. Trees don't talk. No. The man agrees. But they fall. And then, as if choreographed by some unseen hand, a massive branch drops from the rain tree above right between them. It doesn't startle. It simply happens. And in the gentle shiver of its landing, Matthias feels something shift in him. The man smiles. "That was the first truth." Suffering, Matthias whispers. The man nods. Dukkha. Not punishment, not a curse, just the ache of existing, the friction between wanting and what is. The forest seems to breathe with them now. A bird calls once, then goes quiet. Even the rain quiets, as if leaning in to listen. And if that is the first truth, Matthias asks, "What of the others?" The man's smile fades into softness. When you crave to stop the rain, you suffer. But when you listen to it, really listen, you learn that it was never falling against you, only falling, as rain does. Matthias blinks slowly. The line between metaphor and reality has blurred. The falling leaves, the broken branch, the silence, all feel like pages in a book he can't read, yet understands anyway. He stays seated for hours, maybe longer. His stomach does not grumble. His axe stays strapped. The forest begins to feel less like a place around him and more like a presence within him. At some point, the man closes his eyes again, not asleep, simply resting. Matthias watches the breath, watches the rain, watches the way each moment arrives, and leaves without complaint. The second truth, though unspoken, is already beginning to form in his chest, that suffering has roots like the rain tree. And if one digs deep enough, not with an axe, but with stillness, one might find what's feeding it. A breeze stirs. The branch between them shifts slightly, revealing its rings, circles within circles, like lifetimes overlapping. Matthias leans forward, fingers brushing its surface. He does not know it yet, but he's about to get lost. Not in the forest, but in himself. The branch lies still between them, weathered, moss-flecked, its cracked surface soft beneath Matthias's fingertips. It no longer seems like wood. It feels like something else. A question, a memory, or perhaps a mirror that doesn't reflect his face, but the weight he's been dragging behind his spine since he first picked up an axe. The man across from him still hasn't moved. Not a blink, not a word. Yet somehow, he teaches without effort, like the sun warming a stone without asking it to change. Matthias exhales, long and low, like he's emptying out the years. Then he hears something in the underbrush. A rustle, followed by a delicate hiss. His muscles tense out of habit. Danger snake. He turns his head slowly, careful not to disturb the stillness. And sure enough, just a few paces away, a serpent glides through fallen leaves. Its scales shimmer like damp obsidian. It is not moving toward him. nor away. It simply is, present, undisturbed. Observing, the man finally opens his eyes again. The snake does not hate the stone it slithers over. He says softly. It does not cling to the warmth it leaves behind. It moves. Matthias nods, slowly, then winces. His hand rises to his side. There beneath the sweat-soaked fabric, he feels the tender sting of an old wound reopened. A gash from yesterday's stumble across a jagged stump. At the time, he had ignored it. No time to fuss over pain when there's work to be done. But now it pulses, throbs, a quiet thump that seems to echo the second noble truth before the monk even speaks. Pain arises, the man says, noticing the wince without judgment. But suffering, that's the thorn we twist ourselves. Matthias doesn't answer. He's listening, not just to the monk, but to the throbbing, the throb of the wound, the throb of the heart, the throb of craving itself. He remembers the first time he held an axe. Heavy, cold, too large for his boy-sized hands. His father's voice beside him. Don't just swing. Want the wood to split. Want it. So he had. For decades, he'd wanted trees to fall. He'd wanted coin to come. He'd wanted aching limbs to mean something. And all along, beneath it, the want had quietly cut deeper than any blade. Now he sees the layers. Wanting things to be easier. Wanting his back to stop hurting. Wanting his life to have meant more than the calluses on his palms. The monk speaks again. Craving is not the wound, he says, but the finger pressing into it, over and over. Matthias gently lifts his shirt. The skin is inflamed, nothing life-threatening, but it's the way he's treated it, ignored it, resisted it, that has made it swell. Just like his grief, just like his guilt, just like every time he's wanted things to be other than they were. The forest has gone still. Even the snake has vanished, leaving only a faint indentation in the leaves. Matthias finds himself tracing that serpentine path with his eyes. It seems deliberate, curved, not straight, like karma, like how each of his decisions, each swing, each lie, each act of forgetting had curled back to meet him in unexpected ways. Can the wound be healed, he finally asks. The monk tilts his head. Can you stop scratching it? Matthias smiles for the first time all day. Not because it's funny, but because it's true. The pain wasn't his choice, but the clawing, the clinging, the constant rehearsing of old hurts, that perhaps was a kind of habit. He thinks of home, of the cracked ceramic mug he drinks from each morning, of the woman who left 3 years ago, who said only, "There's no space in your life for silence." And now, here he is, sitting in silence so vast he can hear ants crawling on bark. You said there were 4 truths, Matthias murmurs. Yes, says the monk. You've heard 2. Matthias nods. The forest nods with him, leaves sighing with the wind. Suddenly, the monk stands. Not quickly, not slowly, simply with the inevitability of someone who has finished their sitting. He walks past the rain tree, deeper into the jungle. Without gesture or command, Matthias follows, and just like that, they begin to walk, not as strangers, but as something quieter. The path is barely visible. Roots tangle across it like sleeping dragons. Branches brush their shoulders. Insects hum lullabies. After some time hours, maybe they arrive at what looks like the remnants of a fire. Just embers now, glowing soft beneath a canopy of ferns. The monk kneels and stokes it. No wood added, just breath. Matthias sits beside him. The third truth, the monk says, is that suffering can end. Matthias doesn't answer. Instead, he watches the ember, glowing, dimming, glowing again, not by fighting. The monk continues, and not by fleeing, but by seeing the fire for what it is, temporary, fed by fuel. Matthias closes his eyes. For the first time in years, he doesn't feel like a man failing to fix something. He feels allowed to sit, to breathe, to not be better yet. Somewhere, the monk says, you decided that pain meant something was wrong. But what if it just meant you were alive? A pause. Somewhere. The monk says again, you began to believe you had to be useful all the time. That stillness was waste. That softness was weakness. But look around you. Does the forest grow by force? Another pause. The wind sighs through the leaves like a sleeping child. Matthias opens his eyes and watches the ember. Its glow begins to dim. The fire dies not with a cry, but with a breath. Suffering, too, he realizes, ends this way. Not through control, not through rage, but through understanding. The monk doesn't say the words, but Matthias knows what the fourth truth must be. That there's a path, a way, not easy, not quick, but simple, kind, step by step, like walking through a forest barefoot, and finally noticing the softness of moss. He leans back, stares up through the canopy. Rain falls in threads, barely touching him. His axe is still on his back, but it feels lighter now, like it might one day be a memory. The ember winks out. Silence returns. But this time, it does not feel empty. It feels like the beginning of something. The ember is gone. Not with a gasp, not with a struggle, but with the kind of silence that makes even time bow its head. Matthias stays seated beside the circle of ash, the faint scent of burnt wood still lingering like the memory of an old story. He doesn't speak, doesn't need to. The monk beside him, barely moving, simply folds his robe over his knees and stares out toward a clearing that isn't there yet. This is where the fourth truth lives. Not on a mountain peak, not in a scripture, but here amid the damp earth, the scent of bark, the ache in Matthias's spine, and the growing understanding that peace isn't something to be found. It's something to stop chasing. The monk begins to walk again, wordlessly. Matthias follows, no longer questioning the direction. The forest, thick with vines and secrets, parts just enough to guide them, and after a while, measured only by the rhythm of his steps, they come to the stump. It gate is massive, older than either of them, so wide that two men could lie across it head to toe and not touch edges. What remains of its rings glisten in the filtered sunlight, like a fingerprint left by the sky. Matthias runs his palm across the surface, rough, uneven, but alive. Not in the way trees are alive, but in the way memory is. This one, he murmurs, must have stood for centuries. The monk kneels beside the stump and closes his eyes. It fell, he says, not because it was weak, but because everything leans toward release. Matthias nods, and now, gently, unstrapping the axe from his back, he lays it down, not dramatically, not as a ritual, just as one might set down a cup after drinking emptied. He sits. The monk opens his eyes. You've begun the path, he says, not smiling, not solemn, just speaking what is. Right view, right intention, right action. These are not rules, they are reminders. Matthias listens, not just with ears, but with skin, with lungs, with all the tired places inside him that had spent years pretending they were fine. He thinks of his father again, not with anger now, but with understanding. The man had also carried burdens he never named, had also chopped and sweated and swallowed silence with every meal. He sees it now, how craving is passed down like an heirloom, how silence, too, can be sharp, but also how each generation has a choice to put the blade down, to feel, to sit. The monk begins to speak, not as teacher, but as a fellow traveler. He talks of the eightfold path, not in doctrine, but in the rhythm of walking. Right speech, he says, is like speaking only when the forest is quiet enough to echo back. Right livelihood is earning not just to survive, but to do no harm. Right effort is tending the fire without smothering it. And right mindfulness, it's the moment, the monk says, when you notice a leaf falling and realize you, too, are falling gracefully, if you allow it. Matthias breathes, not deeply, not dramatically, just honestly. They remain at the stump a while longer. No need to move, no need to name what's happening. Even the forest has stopped performing. Birds perch without singing. Insects crawl without frenzy. Time leans back and watches, and then, without warning, it begins to rain again. Not a storm, a whisper of water from sky to soil. Matthias tilts his head back and lets it fall on his face. Each drop feels like forgiveness, not for anything he's done, but for having misunderstood for so long. The monk stands. It is time. But before he leaves, he does something unexpected. He kneels, presses his palm against the stump, and bows. Matthias watches, then mirrors the gesture, not because he has to, but because something inside him has softened enough to surrender. The monk turns, walks into the green, and disappears no farewell, no final teaching, just the rustle of undergrowth closing behind him. Matthias stays a little longer. Eventually, he picks up the axe, but now it is not a weapon, not a symbol of striving, just a tool, a thing with its place, like everything else. He walks back the way he came, but nothing looks the same. Every vine seems to bend in gratitude. Every root hums beneath his step. The forest isn't teaching anymore. It's simply being, just like him. And far in the distance, almost forgotten, a village still waits. But he does not rush. He does not rehearse what he will say. He simply walks, one step, then another, then another. The path narrows. The trees grow quiet again. And now, let your body soften, just like Matthias's grip on the axe, like the roots loosening from the earth, like the fire releasing its last breath into the evening sky. Notice the breath moving through you, not something to control, just something to ride, like a leaf floating along a forest stream. You are not the wound. You are the one who has stopped picking at it. You are not the storm. You are the quiet after. Everything changes, even this moment, especially this moment. And so, tonight, just allow yourself to fall gently, like the leaves, like the rain, like a thought that no longer needs to be solved. There is no test to pass, no goal to reach, no role to perform. There is only presence. Let sleep come, not as escape, but as return. The forest is with you. The Buddha beneath the rain tree smiles. And somewhere, just beneath your thoughts, peace is already here. And as the final pulse of the drum melts into silence, you feel the ground beneath your body again cool, steady, unchanging. The last beat still lingers like an echo in your ribs, but something else begins to grow now. Something quiet. Moonlight pours gently through the open window. You hear it before you see it, a soft rustle, the whisper of leaves in a distant corner of the earth, in the foothills of central Chile, where lavender fog licks the edge of a small village. A woman kneels in her garden. The stars above are pinned in their ancient patterns, but her hands are in the soil, warm, damp, full of life. Her name is Isadora. She is not famous, not a monk, not a master of words or robes or sutras, but she knows things, knows them in her knees, in the lines on her fingers, in the way she breathes when the wind shifts just before the rain. Tonight, she is out past bedtime, as always, checking on the chard, speaking in whispers to the basil that's been struggling lately, gently tucking in the sleepy tomato vines. There is no temple bell here, no incense, no formal bowing. And yet there's nothing not sacred. Her every movement is deliberate, quiet, and wrapped in the patience of one who has watched things die and come back again. You might miss it if you rush past her gate. Most people do. But if you paused, if you stood a while in the hush, you'd feel it too. That this woman is doing something rare, something deeply zen. She is not trying to fix the garden. She is trying to understand it. She doesn't demand that it blossom. She listens. That's her real practice. Listening to the soil. And sometimes, In between the crickets and the late blooming roses, the soil talks back. She wasn't always like this. There was a time when Isadora tried to force things, pulling out weeds with too much urgency, replanting roots that weren't ready to move, sighing loudly when the harvest was small. She once threw a bucket at the ground when an entire row of squash succumbed to rot. The garden, of course, did not care. It just kept doing what it does, growing, wilting, composting its own failure into possibility. It was during one especially hot summer when all the lettuce bolted overnight that something changed. Isadora stood with her hands on her hips, sweat in her eyes, surrounded by brittle stems that had turned bitter. She felt defeated. She sat down in the dirt, a small earthquake of frustration behind her ribcage. Then she noticed an ant, calmly dragging a piece of leaf 4 times its size across her sandal. She watched, and something broke open, not in a dramatic, spiritual enlightenment sort of way. More like how a tight muscle finally releases after a long, aching stretch. She breathed out. Then she laughed, quiet, dry, surprised. The garden had not betrayed her. It had simply moved on. The lettuce did what lettuce does when the heat arrives. And she, in her need to control, had forgotten that her job was not to command nature, but to accompany it. From that day, Isadora began tending differently, not like a gardener with a schedule, but like a guest at an unfolding ceremony. She would sit before planting, listening to the rhythm of the wind. She stopped cursing the bugs. She started asking questions instead. Why now? Why here? What wants to grow? She started to see karma everywhere, not the mystical, vengeful version people gossip about, but the real kind, the unfolding of conditions, that the squash only thrived when the compost was balanced, that the strawberries returned after she left the soil fallow for a season, that each mistake she made didn't end the garden, it became its teacher. She remembered how her grandmother used to say, "Let the ground breathe before you plant again." Isadora thought it was superstition, but it turned out to be Buddhist wisdom in disguise. Everything needs space to rest, especially a mind that clings. Her little garden, tucked between crumbling adobe walls and tangled wire fences, became a quiet monastery of sorts. One where the robes were muddy pants, the chants were birdsong, and the scriptures were written in leaf veins. No one bowed, except the sunflowers, and they did it so gracefully. You almost felt like bowing back. Even the weeds had lessons. She once tried to rip out a particularly persistent dandelion, only to find its roots had twisted lovingly around the base of her chili plant, shielding it from wind. After that, she stopped assuming who was a friend and who was a nuisance. Everyone, it seemed, was playing a part. On a soft evening like this, she often reflects on the first noble truth, not with a frown, but a gardener's humility. Suffering exists. Yes, aphids appear. Crops fail. Loved ones don't always return. But when she lets go of the demand for things to be different, when she stops trying to fix everything, she discovers a strange, unexpected joy. The moonlight now spreads over her calloused hands. A snail creeps across a stone near her foot, unhurried, shining faintly. Somewhere, a dog barks twice, then settles. Isadora gently pats the soil over the basil, murmurs, "Good night, little one," and turns toward the house. She carries no basket, only the warmth of having listened well. As she moves, you feel something moving inside you too. A soft loosening, a sense that maybe, just maybe, you don't have to fix everything either. Maybe it's enough to pay attention. Maybe that's where peace starts. The days grow hotter, and the ground begins to harden beneath Isadora's knees. Chilean summer doesn't arrive all at once. It tiptoes in with warm breezes, swollen apricots, and cicadas rehearsing long before their true performance. But this year, the land feels dry too early. Rain clouds drift past without stopping. The streams are thinner, and the buckets take longer to fill. Isadora notices. Of course she does. It's not panic that visits her, at least. Not at first. It's something quieter. A subtle anxiety that hums behind her ribs. Like the way you forget where you put your keys and begin doubting the shape of your own thoughts. She runs her fingers through the dust and looks skyward. The clouds don't answer. Some of her younger neighbors start prepping contingency plans, imported soil, irrigation from plastic tubing, chemical boosters. They mean well. They want to help. They want their tomatoes in December. But Isadora doesn't move as quickly. She crouches near her mulberry tree, hand resting on the trunk like it's an old friend. The bark is cool, unchanging, patient. She remembers her mother's voice. It always arrived gently, even in the midst of hardship. "Wait with the roots," she used to say. "When you think the sky has forgotten you, ask the roots what they remember." Her mother had not been a Buddhist by name, but her spirit was soaked in the Dharma. She lived with a softness, an ability to respond rather than react, even in grief, even when illness came, even when the rain didn't. The roots, it turns out, remember everything. So Isadora waits, not passively. She covers the garden in mulch. She moves her herbs into shade. She waters before dawn, when the earth is still cool enough to drink, and when the ache in her knees protests too loudly. She rests beneath the lemon tree and breathes with it. Inhale, stretch, exhale, release. This is not a story about heroism. Isadora doesn't save the entire village from drought. She doesn't discover a miracle water source beneath her home. What she does is subtler. She watches, day after day, as the basil droops and the spinach falters. She doesn't fight the impermanence. She learns to companion it, sometimes in the evening. She lights a candle not for the gods, not to ask for things, but simply to honor the practice of bearing witness. The flame flickers beside a cracked ceramic bowl that once belonged to her mother. Inside, its seeds, dozens of them, dried, tiny, waiting. None of them will be planted yet. She just likes to be near them, like a reminder potential lives quietly. And still, the garden teaches. One day, as she tends to the outer beds, she notices something unexpected. The rosemary has flourished, not just survived, thrived. Its blue blossoms hum with bees. It's taller than she remembers. When she brushes her hand against its leaves, the fragrance is so strong, it momentarily silences her inner chatter. She leans close. It smells like memory. Later that week, she walks through the market, baskets empty, just observing. There's less food now. People talk in hushed tones about delayed rains, failed harvests. Some eyes are tired. Some hands grip hope too tightly, but others nod to her. They've noticed her garden, how it still holds color, how it hasn't been ripped out and replaced by concrete or plastic. Someone asks, "How do you do it?" She smiles, softly, not smugly. There's no secret, just listening and letting go of the idea that control equals care. That night, under a sliver of moon, she recalls a teaching she once overheard during a lay Dharma talk in Santiago. Something about interbeing, how nothing arises alone. The teacher had used the example of a piece of paper to truly see it. One must see the cloud, the tree, the logger, the sunlight, the person reading. Everything exists because of everything else. It didn't make sense at the time. But now, touching the rosemary, remembering the bees, she begins to understand. Her garden is not just hers. It is the memory of her mother. It is the advice of her grandmother. It is the ash from the neighbor's fire pit. It is the compost of mango skins and old rice. It is the bird that poops a seed, the worm that tunnels, the breath she exhales. Nothing is alone. That includes her pain. There are mornings when she wakes heavy, when the ache in her lower back screams louder than the rooster, when the to-do list clutters her heart. But lately, instead of resisting, she simply names it. Pain, worry, tension. Naming softens it, and sometimes, while boiling tea, she'll laugh at herself, remembering the story of the monk who tried to escape a mosquito and realized it was his own mind buzzing all along. The garden becomes her meditation cushion. The weeds, her koans. The silence, her mantra. She learns that mindfulness is not always about stillness. It's about attention to what is, not to what could have been, not to what might go wrong. And yet, amid all this inner quiet, there's also grief. Isidora's mother used to walk these paths with her, used to crush mint between her fingers, hum songs while picking tomatoes, lean on the garden gate during sunset, saying things like, "This is the good kind of tired." Her absence is sharp sometimes, like a thorn that refuses to dislodge. But it too is part of the soil now. The Buddha spoke of this, of how clinging to what is past only deepens suffering. And Isidora does not cling. She lets the grief breathe. Sometimes she speaks aloud to it. "You're welcome here," she whispers to the ache. "But you don't get to drive." And in this way, the drought becomes less about loss and more about remembering that everything she sees, every blossom, every cracked stone, is part of a story much larger than her, one she's not in charge of, but still gets to participate in. That is grace. So, when the clouds finally do arrive, weeks later, in a sudden rush of silver, she does not shout or dance or post celebratory signs. She simply walks outside, palms up, and stands still as the first drops kiss her brow. Around her, leaves lift their faces, roots stir, soil drinks, and somewhere deep within her, a knowing settles. This too will pass and return and pass again. She breathes. And now, under the slow hush of autumn, the garden leans inward. The light has changed longer shadows, softer edges, the kind that make even dying leaves look golden. Mornings begin with a crisp breath, and the air carries a certain hush, as though the earth itself is preparing to sleep. Isadora wears thicker clothes these days, a woolen shawl draped around her shoulders. Her knees crack a little louder when she kneels, and sometimes she sits instead of squatting, pressing her palms together in her lap before touching the earth. She doesn't fight the change. It's only nature doing what it does, turning. She has lived through 63 turns of the earth around the sun. That is not ancient, but it is enough to have stopped counting years and started counting seasons. And it is in this season that something shifts in her, not in the garden, not in the weather, but in the silent spaces between her breaths. She notices it first one morning when she goes out to check on the pumpkin vines. The leaves are heavy with dew, curled at the edges, surrendering, and she feels not sadness, but a strange kinship, as if her body, too, is curling, not shrinking, but settling, not ending, but preparing. Later, as she sips tea beside her compost pile, she remembers the words a traveling monk once spoke near the river. She hadn't meant to attend his talk, but her bus had broken down, and there he was, barefoot on a wooden stool, speaking not to be wise, but to be kind. "The seed," he said, "does not hurry. It has nowhere else to be." At the time, she had nodded politely. Now she feels the truth of it in her marrow. The seed does not hurry. It breaks open only when the conditions say yes. It does not worry about the fruit it will become. It does not mourn its husk when it falls away. It simply opens, because that is what seeds do. Isadora has her own seeds now, tucked into jars, wrapped in napkins, slipped into small envelopes labeled in pencil green beans, old strain, wild cilantro, mother's cuttings, sunflower, last tall one, each one a memory, each one a promise she may or may not live to see sprout again. But that's the point, isn't it? Not all seeds are planted by the one who saved them. That afternoon, a neighborhood girl named Camilla stops by. She's young, barely 14, but curious, full of that restless energy that hasn't yet learned how to settle. She asks questions about carrots, about marigolds, about why the rosemary still blooms when everything else is folding inward. Isadora smiles. She doesn't answer directly. She hands the girl a trowel instead and points to a patch of earth. "Try," she says. "Watch. Wait." They work side by side, soil under nails, silence between words. The best kind of teaching. By evening, Camilla leaves with dirt on her cheeks and seeds in her pocket. Isadora watches her walk away, remembering the first time she held seeds not as tools, but as teachings. Back then, she didn't know how to listen. She thought she needed to do everything right. But the garden, like life, never asks us to be perfect, only to be present. That night, Isadora lies on her straw mattress beneath a threadbare quilt, her hands folded loosely on her stomach. Through the window, the stars gleam like frost. Her body is tired, but not in the way it used to be. It is tired like a field after harvest, spent, but not empty, used, but not broken. She thinks of her mother. She thinks of Camilla. She thinks of the pumpkins curling into their own surrender. And she smiles. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means understanding that what falls away was never yours to keep, just to care for, to accompany, to love while it was here. You feel your own breath now, slow and steady. You remember the story of the empty boat, that teaching about how, when no one is at the helm, there is nothing to be angry at. And now you understand the deeper truth. The boat was never empty. It was full of causes, conditions, clouds, tides, just like you. And now, as this long tale comes to its resting place, let us drift even slower. The garden is quiet. The moonlight returns, silvering each leaf, each stone. A snail climbs a stalk, soft and luminous. Isadora sleeps, a tiny smile on her lips. Somewhere, a seed begins to open, quietly, in the dark. And you, too, can rest. You don't have to hurry. You don't have to bloom tonight. You don't even need to know what kind of seed you are. Just trust that the soil remembers, the sky remembers. The Dharma never forgets. Even in stillness, you are growing. Let the body soften now. Let your thoughts dissolve like mist on morning vines. Let each breath be a hand pressing gently on the soil of your soul. You are safe. You are whole. You are exactly where you need to be. The gardener has finished her work for the day. The world keeps turning. The roots rest. So may you. And just as the gardener in Chile let go of her need to control the soil's rhythm, learning instead to breathe with it, to feel its pulse in her palms, you, too, now drift onward into a new hum of life, far from moonlit vegetables and dew-heavy petals. The air begins to warm. It thickens with the perfume of eucalyptus, baked earth, and something faintly sweet, like sun-warmed beeswax. In the hills, above Lake Kivu, where the sun rises over mist and banana leaves. A beekeeper named Kamanzi lifts the lid of his favorite hive. He doesn't rush. He never rushes anymore. The bees don't sting him. They used to, especially when he was younger, edgy, impatient, quick to flick them away. But bees remember. And now, after years of working beside them with a gentler mind, they hum around him like old friends who've accepted his odd quirks and finally decided he's safe. His farm is modest, just 3 hives, 2 goats, a half-acre of cassava, and a mango tree he swears hums when it's about to fruit. The bees like the mango flowers best. He does too. There's something soft about the way they bloom, unapologetically fragrant, without needing to shout. He finds himself learning from that. This morning, the bees are calm, and so is he. But it wasn't always like this. There was a time when Kamanzi lived in the city, Kigali, with its polished storefronts and 2 loud buses. He sold spare parts and shouted over traffic, wore sharp shoes, and measured life by profit margins. But his heart, always an odd kind of drum, beat slower than the pace around him. And when his mother passed, something cracked, or perhaps it just finally gave way. He left, moved to the edge of the hills, bought a plot of land with the little money she left him, and set up his first hive with no training. Just intuition, an old smoker, and the vague memory that bees like mothers give more than they take. Now, years later, he works with them like breath works with lungs. Still, he is human, and humans carry seeds of unrest. One morning, as mist still blankets the field, he notices something unusual. One hive is louder than usual, not just buzzing, but agitated like a kettle boiling with no whistle. He peers inside. Chaos. Bees are swarming in disarray, crowding the edges, aimless. He checks again and realizes something is missing. The queen. She's either dead or she's fled, and without her, this hive will collapse. He sits beside it, strangely heartbroken. He tells himself not to panic, but he already is. His hands shake as he lights his smoker. The air fills with woodsy coils of gray, and the bees momentarily still. But his thoughts don't. Why now? Why this hive? He thinks about replacing her, forcing order, a quick solution, a new queen from another place, another rhythm. But part of him hesitates. Something quieter, wiser. He watches the hive, and over the hours, something stirs not in the bees, but in him. He notices the way they begin to cluster near the comb, almost as if waiting, almost as if trusting. He remembers a teaching he once overheard long ago, when he had passed through a monastery on the way to buy cassava seed. A monk had said, sometimes, when nothing is left to do, the most skillful action is non-action. He didn't understand it then, but now, sitting beside a queenless hive with trembling hands and a strangely steady heart, it begins to make sense. So he waits, not as a tactic, but as a practice. 2 days pass, then 3. Each day, he brings fresh water to the bees. Each night, he sits under the stars, letting their hum bleed into his chest like a lullaby. And on the fourth morning, he peers inside the hive and sees something impossible. A queen cell. The bees have chosen one of their own larvae. A new queen is being nurtured not because of his intervention, but because the conditions allowed it. And suddenly, he understands karma not as punishment or prize, but as pattern, cause, condition, result. He didn't force a queen into place. He created space for one to arise. His hands, still calloused, now tremble less. His thoughts, once quick to lurch, now pause like bees landing softly on a bloom. And just like that, a deeper stillness begins to grow in him. Not the stillness of silence, but the stillness of non-resistance. Because he finally sees life, like a hive, doesn't need him to control it. It needs him to see it clearly, to respond, not react, to tend the field, but let the seeds decide how they bloom. The bees teach him this without speaking. And in that way, they are the best teachers he's ever had. The swarm settles, but something new stirs within Kamanzi. Not ambition, not fear, just awareness. After the queen cell matures and the new monarch emerges, he watches with quiet awe as the hive reorganizes itself. Bees take to their tasks as if they were always meant for this moment. For them, there is no grief, no celebration, only continuity. Life continues, and that is enough. But for Kamanzi, the event leaves a lingering pulse beneath the surface of his mind. He begins to wonder how much of his life, his choices, his restlessness had been shaped not by awareness, but by clinging. Clinging to plans, to the way things were supposed to unfold, to the roles others expected him to play. As the bees return to rhythm, he begins a new practice observation. He observes the land with new eyes, notices how each anthill seems to mirror the shape of the clouds above it, how the guava tree leans ever so slightly toward the east, as if listening to the morning sun. He sits with the bees but no longer fixes them with worry or intention. He simply listens until one day the sound changes again. He hears it first before he sees it, a restless hum near the far hive. It's not angry, just uncertain, like a decision being made. When he lifts the lid, he knows, swarming again, but this time, it's not chaos. It's choreography. A large portion of the hive is preparing to leave. The air thickens with anticipation as scout bees flicker through the sky, seeking new ground. The queen, now mature, is ready to lead. This is natural. It is how bees expand their colonies. It is their nature, but it still aches. Because he had grown attached. He watches the queen, majestic in her own right, begin her slow emergence toward the hive's entrance. Dozens of bees part for her, like disciples making way for a teacher. The wind lifts, the trees whisper, and Kamanzi realizes he is holding his breath. He wants to stop it. Not because it's wrong, but because it feels like loss. Still, Something in him, something new, places a steady hand on his own chest. Let go. And so he does. The swarm lifts. It spills into the sky like smoke rising from the mountains, a living cloud of sound and shimmer. He doesn't chase them. He doesn't grieve. He simply stands barefoot in the grass, heart wide open, throat tight, but not closing. And he bows, not to the queen, not even to the bees, but to the lesson. This is how all things move forward, not by clutching, but by releasing. Later that night, the hive left behind is strangely quiet. He feels the silence in his body, and it frightens him a little. As silence always does at first, he steps into his small shelter, makes tea, and lights the old beeswax candle his mother left him. The flame flickers. A mosquito dances close, then drifts away. He watches the steam rise from the cup and recalls something else the monk once said. Let the silence answer what words cannot. So he sits and waits, and in that quiet, something rises, not an answer, but a new kind of question. If the hive can thrive after loss, can I that night? He dreams of honeycomb, but not like before, not geometric, not gold. This honeycomb is a map, and he is walking across it barefoot. Each cell contains a memory, each memory a lesson. He wakes before dawn, with tears in his eyes, not sadness, not joy, just stillness and a thought. Perhaps stillness is not the absence of movement, but the absence of resistance. In the following weeks, he tends his remaining hives with a lighter heart. He stops measuring their output. He begins to sit beside them, not just as their caretaker, but as their student. And the bees, as always, hum without judgment. One afternoon, a neighbor visits. A boy, no older than 16, eyes sharp with curiosity, hands fidgeting in the straps of a ragged backpack. I heard you keep bees, the boy says. Kamanzi nods. I want to learn. He doesn't hesitate. He hands the boy a veil, a pair of gloves, and a smile. Then listen, he says, but not just with your ears. The boy tilts his head, confused, but follows. Together, they approach the hive, and for the first time, Kamanzi speaks the things he never thought he would teach: how to open a hive slowly, how to read the weight of a honey frame, how to recognize the dance of scout bees as they spiral toward new territory. But more than that, he teaches the pauses, how to breathe before touching the hive, how to wait for the bees to speak first, how to notice not just their wings, but your own heartbeat. Because beekeeping, like the Dharma, isn't about mastery, it's about presence. Later, after the lesson, the boy asks why the bees left the first hive. They didn't leave. Kamanzi says, looking up at the clouds, they moved forward. The boy frowns, then nods slowly, and something shifts in the space between them. In the echo of wings, between flowers and sky, a new hive begins, not of bees, but of understanding. And as the boy walks back down the hillside path, his hands still smelling faintly of smoke and wax, Kamanzi turns to the quiet hum of his land once more. The bees have settled for the evening, their wings tucked into their sides like monks drawing in their robes for zazen. Twilight is thick with sound crickets tuning their tiny strings, the far-off laughter of children returning from a stream, and, always, the low eternal whisper of Lake Kivu breathing in and out the horizon. He watches the sky deepen. There was a time when nightfall unsettled him. Too much space. Too few distractions. But now, he welcomes it. The way it folds around him, like a shawl woven from breath and memory. The way it holds his thoughts without trying to fix them. Because he finally sees not every thought is a problem to be solved. Some are simply clouds to be observed, then released. He walks to the apiary with his lantern in hand, not to work, but just to be near them. The bees don't fly much at night, but their presence lingers. A quiet, shared rhythm. He sits on the worn log by the edge of the field, where the papaya trees bow gently in the breeze, and reflects on how far he has come, not in distance, but in willingness. Willingness to stay, to observe, to not reach for conclusions, but to let them come like honey slow, golden, and inevitable. Smoke curls up from the old incense stick he lights at his side. Not for ritual, just habit. It mingles with the smell of the earth, of leaves still wet with dew from a passing cloud, of the beeswax that never quite leaves his skin. He closes his eyes, and suddenly he remembers the moment years ago when he first cracked open a hive, how he flinched, how he tried to act like he wasn't afraid, how he moved too fast and paid for it in stings and shame. But it wasn't the pain that changed him. It was the realization that he had entered a world governed not by dominance, but by dance. A world where stillness wasn't passive, it was powerful. Where observation wasn't laziness, it was wisdom. Where yielding wasn't weakness, it was alignment. This, he now understands, is the Dharma made visible. The hive is not separate from the teaching. It is the teaching. He thinks back to the queenless hive, how his urge was to fix, to control, how he nearly imported a new queen, imposing an outside solution onto an internal mystery, and how, by waiting, by doing nothing in the right way, he allowed the truth to emerge on its own. He knows now the mind works the same way. You can't replace what's missing by force. You must create the conditions for clarity to arise. And clarity, like a queen, appears when you no longer chase it. Tonight, as stars blink one by one above the hills, he breathes deeper. He does not count the hives. He does not worry about honey yield, or weather forecasts, or next season's blossoms. He simply breathes, and somewhere, beneath the soil and stone, something ancient hums along with him. A few days later, he wakes to the sound of bees not near the hives, but just outside his window. He steps into the golden morning light, barefoot, and sees it. A new swarm. Not the old one returned. A new one entirely, resting in the low branches of the avocado tree. He smiles not out of possession, but out of recognition. They have come not because he asked them to, but because the world turns, because life moves, because when you make space, life finds it. He fetches a box, a clean frame. No smoke, no rush. He simply waits nearby. And when they are ready, the bees walk themselves into their new home without force, without fear. And he, the once impatient man who had fled from the city to escape his own racing thoughts, watches in stillness, no longer running, no longer resisting, just breathing, just witnessing, just welcoming. And in this moment, as bees settle into comb, as light spills across the grass, and as the wind hushes every last leaf into surrender, he finally understands what it means to live amid the swarm and remain still inside, to be the eye of the hive, to be the silence within the hum, to be free. Now, the light softens. You feel it too, don't you? That shift, that slowing, like the bees easing into their hive for the night. You, too, begin to draw inward. The hum fades, the air cools, even your breath finds a quieter rhythm. Inhale, slowly. Exhale, even slower. There's nothing more to chase now. No more lessons to grasp. No more questions to solve. Everything you needed tonight has already arrived on wings of story, of smoke, of honey-laced stillness. Let it settle. Let your body become like Kamanzi's field soft, receptive, still. Imagine the hush of bees sleeping in the comb. Thousands of tiny heartbeats pulsing in quiet unity. That's your breath now. That's your mind. That's your life. Whole and worthy. Just as it is. If a swarm can return home, so can you. Rest now. Sleep deeply. And let the world carry on. One wing beat at a time. And as the last echo of the beekeeper's breath dissolves into the hum of her quiet hive, the wind lifts again, this time colder, sharper, and wide like the sky itself. You're no longer in Rwanda now. You're riding east, high into a land where the clouds cast long shadows that drift like thoughts across the steppe. The grass here doesn't whisper, it shivers. And somewhere in the vast Mongolian plain, you are not watching from afar, you are in the saddle. You ride not fast, not slow, but with a rhythm older than memory. The hoofbeats are steady and deep, like a drum played only for the earth to hear. The horse beneath you is dust-colored, a calm creature with a name you no longer say aloud. It doesn't matter. Names here blow away with the wind. The chill bites. But you don't complain. Mongolian winters are for the patient. And you, once full of urgency, now count time in hoofbeats. You used to race ahead, chasing something, money, meaning, maybe a place to settle. Now you just ride, a man on a journey without a finish line. As the light tilts west, You spot a rise in the land, a shadow in the distance. It's not a tree. Trees don't stand alone in this part of the world. It's a structure, or more accurately, what's left of one. An old shrine, roof half collapsed, walls faded by sun and storms. You dismount. Your knees ache from the ride. Your breath curls in the air. Everything around you seems to pause. There is silence, but not the dead kind. It's alive, expansive. It swells between each gust of wind, like a breath the land has learned to hold. You step inside the shrine. There's nothing valuable, just old stones and a tattered banner. But there's a sense of presence, as if someone never really left. And then you hear it, not a voice, not words, just the pause, the moment after a footstep, the space between two hooves striking dirt, the hush that lingers before the next breath. You don't know what it means yet, but it feels important, sacred, even. That night, you camp nearby, curling close to your horse for warmth. You sleep lightly. Wind moves through your dreams like a teacher who doesn't raise their voice. And in the pale hour before dawn, you meet someone. He's already there when you awaken. An old monk, wrapped in the thick robes of the north, sitting at the edge of the ruined shrine like he's always been part of it. You don't know where he came from. There are no tracks in the frost, no pack, no horse. He simply says, "You ride fast." You nod. He adds, "But you listen slowly." And somehow, that cuts deeper than any insult. Or perhaps it's not an insult at all, just a mirror. You share a fire with him. Tea brewed over dry dung, smoky and bitter. He says little, but when he speaks, the silence afterward feels like the real teaching. You watch the steam from the cup rise and vanish. He tells you of the wind, not just the wind in the sky, but the wind inside, the restlessness, the craving to arrive. He gestures to your saddle, still warm from your ride. Even your horse knows where to rest, he says. Why don't you? You don't answer. What would you say? That you don't know where else to go? That you've been riding since your brother died, since the war, since your wife no longer waited. Instead, you listen. Not to him, to the space between his sentences. Later, he leads you down a slope, to a circle of stones. Wind carves a sound through them that resembles chanting. The step speaks, he says, but she speaks slow. He leaves before dawn the next day. You never see him mount a horse, never see him walk away. He is just gone. But you remain for 3 more nights, listening to the emptiness, letting it teach you. There is no storybook lesson, no dramatic revelation, just one quiet realization that arrives on the 4th day. You've been galloping not away from something, but over it. Grief, regret, restlessness, they've always been right beneath you, buried in the dirt your horse kicks up. And every time you ran faster, the noise of motion just masked the cries you refused to hear. You remount on the 5th morning, slower this time. You ride with pauses. You let the step fill you, and in the rhythm of hooves, clop clop, silence. Clop clop, you begin to hear the Dharma, not from a sutra, not from a teacher, but from the land itself, because the Buddha never said you had to sit cross-legged to wake up. Sometimes you wake up mid-saddle when you stop looking ahead and start noticing what's beneath you. And right now, there is silence between each hoofbeat. And within that silence, the beginning of peace. You ride farther now, not to escape, but to see. The world hasn't changed, but your gaze has. Each stone, each slope, each lonely stretch of grass no longer feels like background. They are alive with lessons, waiting. It's late afternoon. When your horse slows, she stumbles. Almost imperceptibly, you dismount, and only then do you see the swelling in her front leg. A twist from uneven ground, perhaps. It isn't serious yet, but it will be. You've known enough horses to hear what they can't say. You speak to her softly, brushing the dust from her flanks, telling her this journey can pause. Not for the first time. She understands more than a human would. Her eyes close. She leans into your touch. You walk now, leading her. The step stretches forever in all directions, and there are no signs, no roads, no maps. But your memory nudges you east toward a small cluster of trees you remember from a trade route. A rare thing in this grassland. Trees often mean water, and sometimes people. Evening lowers itself like a thick wool blanket. Smoke curls on the horizon. Someone is near. As you approach, a round yurt rises from the landscape, camouflaged in faded canvas. Two goats bleat nearby. A woman steps out. Her face is carved with time. Her hands are dipped in dye. You bow. Say nothing at first. Mongolian etiquette favors quiet beginnings. She sees your horse, nods, gestures to the hitching post. Come, she says. You'll eat. Inside, the yurt is warm. The air smells of curdled milk, leather, and sage. A small altar glows in one corner on it. A figure of the Buddha carved from wood. Not ornate, not perfect, just familiar. You drink better tea? It coats your throat and slows your thoughts. You realize you haven't spoken in days. And somehow, it feels like you've said more that way. She introduces herself as Naran. Her husband was a healer, she says, traveled to the edges of the country, tending to both animals and people. Sometimes unsure who needed it more. He died 2 winters ago, but people still bring their wounded here. You nod. My horse. She already knows. Tomorrow, she says. Let her rest. You sleep close to the coals, listening again, not to wind this time, but to the creaking of the yurt walls, the breath of goats, the steady beat of your heart. Morning brings the sun like an apology. Naran crouches beside your horse, murmuring things to her words you can't hear, maybe not even real words. She applies a poultice of fermented roots and singed herbs. Her touch is practiced, kind. Later, you help her with chores, fetch water, split wood. She says little, But when she does, it's always a question aimed not at your ears, but your beliefs. What do you think makes you who you are? You shrug. Memory, maybe. She says. And if memory fades, are you less yourself? You don't answer. That afternoon, she hands you an old mask made of felt and wire. It was my husband's, she says. He used to wear it to make children laugh. They never knew his name, but they remembered the man who danced like wind. She chuckles. Funny, isn't it? You spend a life building a name, and in the end, strangers remember your laughter more than your title. You sit outside that evening, mask in your lap. It looks silly, but the longer you hold it, the more it feels sacred, a symbol of freedom from identity. You've carried many names: son, soldier, merchant, husband, each one like a layer of armor. Necessary? Once, but heavy, Naran says. Sometimes names are like shoes. You wear them till they no longer fit. That night, you dream of yourself without a name. You are just breath, just presence. A being moving through space, no titles, no roles. You wake up not confused, but lighter. The next day, your horse limps less. The swelling has eased. You help Naran repair a fence post. You laugh when a goat escapes. You forget, for a few hours, who you were before arriving. That evening, she asks, what will you do when you leave? You smile, walk, perhaps, then ride. Not to be someone, just to be. She nods. You'll find the riverbed 2 days from here, she says. It's dry now, but not dead. Listen well when you pass. The ground still remembers water. You don't leave the next morning. You stay one more day. You think she knows why. On your final night, she gives you a scarf dyed with crushed flowers and steeped in the smoke of dried juniper. Smells like the old world, she says. You tie it loosely around your neck. It catches the wind and flutters like a prayer flag. You feel no need to say thank you. She understands. As you ride away, she waves. But it's not a goodbye. It's a blessing. You travel slowly now, not just to protect your horse, but to protect your awareness. You pause often, not from fatigue, but from reverence. And when you reach the riverbed she spoke of, cracked and vast and strangely beautiful, you dismount. You sit. You listen. The wind here doesn't howl. It whispers. And for a moment, in the emptiness where water once flowed, you hear something deeper than sound. A teaching too subtle for words. And it waits patiently, just like the land, for you to be still enough to notice. The sun hangs low, bronzing the dry riverbed like a forgotten relic. You stand where water once ran wild, the cracks beneath your boots curling like ancient script. There is no roar of current here, no birdsong, no insects, just the great silence, louder than any storm. This is not absence. This is presence without interruption. You lead your horse through the empty basin, each hoof-fall like a gong against the brittle earth. The scarf Naran gave you dances behind your shoulder. Its faded red like a splash of memory in the pale expanse. By midday, the wind shifts. It smells of iron and ash unusual for this land. Then you see it, far ahead, a storm building at the edge of vision. Dust climbs like steam from a boiling pot, forming into towering walls of tan and gray. Your horse snorts softly. A dust storm, no shelter in sight. You dismount and tug her reins, quickening your pace. But within minutes, the wind arrives sudden, like karma arriving after long forgetfulness. The sky goes brown. The steppe vanishes. Sand pelts your face, enters your eyes, fills your mouth. You shield yourself with your cloak, crouch beside your horse. She presses close, trembling. The storm screams without shape, like 1,000 voices all saying nothing. You close your eyes. You remember Naran's question. If memory fades, are you less yourself? Right now, memory means nothing. Vision means nothing. Your name, your story useless against the wind. And so you let go of the urge to run, of the panic that rides under your skin. You do the one thing the storm doesn't expect. You listen, not to the noise, but to the moment beneath it. Your breath becomes your anchor. Inhale, exhale, a metronome in chaos. Thoughts swirl regrets, half-formed fears, fragments of conversations long past. Let them come, let them go. Somewhere in the storm, the teachings stir. Life is wind. You are the silence it moves through. The storm lasts hours or minutes, you're no longer sure. But when it ends, it does so without warning. One moment, rage. The next, stillness. As if reality itself took a long breath and forgot to exhale. You and your horse are coated in grit. Your lips are cracked, but you're here. More here than you've ever been. You mount slowly. The scarf flutters again, weightless. And for the first time, you realize you have no destination, only direction. You ride without hurry. You ride with no map. And that's when you notice the more still you are inside. The more the land seems to open. You pass a crumbled stone stupa, overgrown with thorn. You pause to walk a slow circle around it. You do not pray. You just bow, once to the unknown. At twilight, you find a hollow in the earth, shielded by low rock, a place to rest. You boil a little rice over a flickering fire. The smoke rises crooked and lazy. Your horse grazes nearby. The scarf smells faintly of juniper and dust. Night falls gently. You sit beside your fire and reflect not by thinking, but by letting everything settle. Like sand after a storm, you think of the monk by the shrine, still as stone. You think of Naran, who healed by listening more than speaking. You think of the riverbed that taught you how silence can remember everything. And you understand. The teachings were never outside you. They were always waiting for you to become quiet enough to notice. You are not a horseman. You are not a trader. You are not a husband, nor a son, nor a wanderer. You are awareness. You are the space between hoofbeats. You are the breath between questions. You are the silence riding beneath motion. And in that space, You are free. So now, as you settle under the stars, wrapped in your cloak, the world softens. The fire flickers lower. The night stretches longer. There are no more stories to chase, no more names to defend. Just a gentle warmth where your heart once beat faster. Breathe in. Feel the quiet settle in your chest like a bird returning home. Breathe out. Let the long journey slip into the earth beneath you. Even the horse sleeps now, one ear twitching against a dream you'll never know. Somewhere out there, the storm has passed. Somewhere behind you, a woman tends goats beneath a sky she never tries to name. Somewhere ahead, the land unfolds without end, and here you are, resting. You do not need to understand everything. You do not need to fix anything. Just this breath, just this stillness. Remember the sound of the riverbed without water. Remember the monk who said more in silence than words could carry. Remember that in this vast, rushing world, the deepest teachings hide in the pauses. So let go now. Let your mind soften. Let your limbs grow heavy. Let the horse of your thoughts unbridle itself and wander back into the field. You are not the rider, nor the path, nor the storm. You are the silence between all things. Sleep well. The last story faded like incense in the wind, and now the flame dances on a new wick, its golden tongue flickering above a palm oil lamp deep in the heart of old Java. You find yourself seated beside a man who writes not to be read, but to disappear. The candlelight wavers against the rice paper wall, casting silhouettes of banana leaves outside. Rain begins to fall soft at first, then harder, as if the sky itself is remembering something it once tried to forget. The scribe adjusts his seated posture, knees folded beneath his woven mat, spine straight but never rigid. His name is Arya, but no one calls him that anymore. In the monastery, he's known simply as the one who copies day after day, page after page, preserving the Dharma one syllable at a time. Tonight, the scroll before him glistens with a sheen of humidity. The ink sticks slow to release its pigment into the shallow pool of water on the inkstone. Still, he waits. Like the bamboo outside, he bends without breaking. Arya dips the fine hairbrush into the inky pool, lifting it with the same reverence one might offer to a lotus bloom. He doesn't copy blindly. Every syllable is a breath, every line a bow. The room smells of sandalwood and damp soil. A gecko chirps from the rafters like a reminder even the smallest things echo through silence. But tonight, the words blur. Not from sleepiness he knows sleep's rhythm well, but from the monsoon pushing against the walls of the hut, drumming its chaotic rhythm like a child asking a question that has no answer. Outside, the mango trees sway violently. Water runs in rivulets through the temple garden. Arya pauses. He could stop, roll the scroll back up, wait for the storm to pass. But then he remembers this is the lesson. The Buddha once said that the world is on fire with craving, with aversion, with delusion. And here is Arya, trying to transcribe clarity while the world outside trembles. Fitting, isn't it? So he breathes and writes. The characters form slowly. Sabbe Sankara, Anika. All conditioned things are impermanent. He's written it hundreds of times. And still, tonight, the words ripple deeper. The storm will pass. The ink will dry. Even this breath will soon become memory. He feels the old pain rise in his knee. The one from when he stumbled on the stone steps, carrying too many scrolls in youth. It used to make him angry. Why does a body betray the mind's discipline? But now, he simply bows inwardly to the sensation. Hello, ache. You too are part of this moment. Lightning flashes. For a split second, the room is pure white, then dark again. Arya doesn't flinch. He's written through worse. Years ago, a goat once barged into the scriptorium and chewed half a scroll. Arya had laughed until his ribs hurt. The monks didn't. But to him, it was a teaching even Dharma must accept bite marks. Tonight, his challenge is not a goat, but the slipping focus inside his own mind. The storm is not outside, it is inside. Thoughts rise like wind. What if this copy is not good enough? What if the ink runs out before dawn? What if no one reads these scrolls? What if? He places the brush down and lets the breath anchor him. The question is not what if, but what now? Inhale, exhale. He listens to the rain hitting the palm leaves, listens to the droplets racing down the slanted tile roof, listens to the pause between two thunderclaps. That pause is a gate. He steps through it. Arya begins again. Somewhere behind the paper wall, a temple bell chimes once. Not for the hour, just because someone else, in another room, felt the need to remind the world that it still exists. He smiles. His brushstroke becomes more confident. Earlier that day, the abbot had said, half seriously, the ink flows clearer when the heart doesn't try to guide the hand. Arya had nodded. Now he knows what it meant. The heart is too entangled. It clings. It worries. It edits. But the hand, when left alone, knows the way back to stillness. He thinks of the time a visiting monk tried to use a bamboo pen instead of a brush. The ink splattered everywhere, and still. The monk laughed. Now the scroll wears its own karma. He had said. Arya wonders, is he merely preserving words, or is he practicing the letting go that each word teaches? The candle sputters. Wind presses against the door like a curious stranger. A loose tile flaps on the roof. Nothing is still except his mind. He is no longer copying teachings. He is becoming them. The scroll before him is almost halfway complete now. The characters look different in the dim light. Each curve of ink carries intention. Some of them even look like waves, soft crests rising, falling. He suddenly recalls a story, the one about the monk who meditated beside a river for 7 years, only to realize The water had taught him more than any sutra ever could. Maybe that's why he hears so much in the rain. A drop lands on his wrist. The roof leaks again. He covers the scroll with a square of silk. The storm isn't done, and neither is he. Tomorrow, he'll dry the paper in the morning sun. Tomorrow, he'll laugh with the cook about how water doesn't care what scrolls say. But tonight, he remains here anchored in a hut of flickering flame and wet shadows. He writes again, Sabe Sankara, Anika. The ink blurs slightly, but that's okay. All conditioned things are impermanent, even the mistakes, even the self who makes them. The candle burns lower now, its pool of wax expanding like a small lake at the edge of the wooden desk. The rain has softened, falling in slow rhythms, as if the clouds themselves have tired of weeping. In the quiet, Arya unrolls a fresh scroll, his fingers moving with the confidence of ritual. The storm outside is past, but within him, a subtler challenge brews. It starts with a single stroke too sharp, too rushed. The character looks wrong. He leans closer. It is wrong. A single line bent the wrong way. A mistake. He sighs. In the old days, such an error would have meant recopying the entire scroll. But here, deep in the forest monastery, hours from any judgment or official inspection, the rules soften like old paper. And yet, Arya pauses. His hand lingers over the scroll. Erase it. Start again. Let it be. His fingers hover above the brush, as if asking it what to do. Then he remembers the old monk's words. Words passed down, not through scripture, but through an overheard conversation during a quiet dusk many seasons ago. Sometimes, a misstep is where the lesson reveals itself. Just don't step there twice. So Arya leaves the error, draws a small correction mark next to it, and continues. By now, the room holds the faint warmth of discipline, not the cold rigidity of rules, but the soft heat that comes from devotion, from repetition, from allowing the small to become sacred. The ink flows again. Kamam Kedam intention is the field. He writes it slowly, letting the meaning soak deeper than the ink. Karma, not as punishment, not as reward, but as rhythm. Outside, a chicken scratches through puddles. Somewhere in the forest, a cicada sings its late monsoon song. The sound weaves through the air like a silk thread through cotton. Arya's mind drifts briefly. He remembers the child he once was, running through the wet rice terraces, chasing dragonflies with feet coated in mud. Before scrolls, before silence, before the monastery walls absorbed his laughter and reshaped it into something gentler. He once thought his life would be grand, full of speeches, teachings, travels. Instead, he spent most of it at this desk, copying someone else's words. But in this moment, he feels no lack. Because what is this work, if not a form of meditation? A way to embody the Eightfold Path not by proclaiming it, but by living it in ink-right intention, right effort, right mindfulness, all gently bleeding from the tip of a brush into rice paper. He glances at the shelf behind him. Dozens of scrolls lived there. His past selves, in silent roles. A lifetime of mistakes and corrections, of night ink and daydreams. Some of them contain errors no one will ever notice. Others contain the truest words he's ever transcribed. He knows that someday the scrolls will crumble, mold, moths, or fire will take them. But the act of writing the practice that never vanishes. A soft knock comes at the sliding door. Arya doesn't move, just raises his voice gently. Yes, it's one of the novices, barely 15. Master Arya, the candle oil. Do you need more? Arya smiles. Leave it by the door. Footsteps retreat. The knock returns. A small clay jar appears, carried by a trembling hand. The boy's eyes are wide with wonder, as if unsure whether he's interrupting a sacred act or simply a man writing in the dark. Arya nods in thanks. No words needed. He pours the oil slowly, the flame shrinking, then swelling, dancing higher like it too was given a second chance. Tonight's lesson isn't about copying perfectly. It's about the why behind the copying. He returns to the scroll. Sitanaham, bhikkhave vadami. It is volition, monks, that I call karma. The sentence unfurls across the parchment, brush gliding with a whisper. And with it comes a memory. It was during his 3rd year at the monastery. A traveling monk had arrived with nothing but a begging bowl and a story about a woman who lived beside a salt flat. Every day, she boiled brine, collected salt, sold what she could, and gave the rest away. When asked why, she said, "Salt is not wealth. Salt is what I do while I learn how to stop needing more." Arya had never forgotten her, not because of her wisdom, but because she never once used the word dharma, yet lived it fully. Maybe this is why the old texts matter, not because they contain the truth, but because they remind us where to look when the storm inside rises. A droplet lands again, this time not from the roof, but from his own eyelash. He hadn't realized his eyes had welled up. Gratitude? Maybe. Or the strange, quiet joy that rises when everything else falls away. He writes on. The brush is nearly worn, the tip frayed, its hair clumps slightly, but he presses forward. The brush, like the body, will not last forever. He lifts it anyway. Appamato amatapadam. Mindfulness is the path to the deathless. Outside, the rain has stopped completely. The silence isn't empty. It's rich, full of paused birdsong, dripping leaves. A single frog testing the air for moonlight. Arya's brush lifts. A final stroke. He places the brush down and rolls the scroll with care, tying it with a worn thread the color of ochre. He doesn't need to reread it. He knows it was enough, because in the act of copying, he became a little less of himself, and something in that subtraction felt like peace. Tomorrow, another scroll, another storm, another lesson. But for now, just this moment, this warm glow, this worn mat, this whisper of ink on paper fading into the hush of a world finally at rest. The candle flame flickers for the third time that night, though this time it's not from wind or rain. The air is perfectly still now, and so is Arya. He sits at his desk, scroll rolled and tied beside him, brush washed and laid flat, but his eyes remain open, watching the quiet glow reflect in the lacquered inkstone. The final scroll waits beside him, blank, crisp, and uncreased. A new beginning. Or perhaps the last page of something long written in silence. He takes a breath, slow and full. Outside, the moon climbs past the banyan branches, casting silver ribbons through the rice paper window. The storm is gone. Only the scent of wet soil lingers, the smell of things washed clean. Arya picks up the last scroll and unwraps it. But tonight, before he writes even a single character, he closes his eyes. There's a moment of pause where nothing happens. Then he bows, not to anyone in particular, but to the moment itself. A bow to this life. This silence, this long, slow work of copying what cannot be spoken. He dips the brush, but pauses again. This time, not from doubt, but from clarity. He recalls an old teaching whispered during his early years. When you no longer need to copy the Dharma begins to copy you. At the time, he didn't understand. Now, perhaps, he does. His hand moves not quickly, not slowly. It just moves. The characters unfold, not as commands, but as invitations. Each one a footprint in soft soil. Each one a letting go. Dhammam saranam gacchami. I go to the Dharma for refuge. The phrase pours out like water from a bowl tipped gently. There's no rush, no clinging, just movement and stillness inside that movement. Tonight's story isn't in what he writes, but in what he lets pass through him. He becomes the page, the brush, the breath between syllables. He thinks of all the hands before his scribes, whose names were lost, but whose ink still whispers across centuries. He sees them, not with his eyes, but through the rhythm of his strokes. 1,000 unknown brothers and sisters in ink, each of them once sitting just like this, bent over a scroll, listening to frogs, feeling the ache in their spine, letting wisdom pass through them like wind through reeds. Arya smiles. The same Dharma, copied 1,000 ways, yet still wordless at its core. He writes anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, non-self. The 3 marks of existence, simple, true, and ungraspable. He hears a rustle behind him, the novice again, this time silent, simply leaving a bowl of warm tea on the floor. Arya doesn't turn, but his heart softens at the offering. The boy is learning too, not from scrolls, but from quiet gestures, repeated day after day. He dips his brush again and writes one last line, though he doesn't know it will be the last. The Buddha is not a statue. The Buddha is the one who sees clearly and lets go. And just like that, the ink runs dry. Not completely, just enough to blur the brush's tip and fade the next stroke. Arya lifts the brush and stares at the scroll. He could re-ink. He could finish the sentence, but instead, he breathes. The scroll is not incomplete. It simply stopped where it needed to. Like a breath, like a life, like a story whispered in candlelight that doesn't need an ending to be whole. He sets the brush down, rolls the scroll, and sits, hands resting on his knees. No rush to sleep, no hunger for more. The flame burns low, the silence deepens. The world does not demand anything from him, and in that emptiness, he finds the greatest fullness of all. A soft hum rises in his chest, not a chant, not a word, just the vibration of stillness echoed outward. He remembers the story of the tea master who spent 40 years refining his pour, not to become perfect, but to disappear inside the motion. Arya smiles. That's what this has been all along, not a life of copying, but a long, slow pouring into the cup of the present moment. The candle's light stretches long now. Shadows melt into each other. A cool breeze rises, brushing the scrolls, the walls, his face. His final act before sleep, he unties the scroll again. And on the last line, beneath the faded ink, he presses a fingerprint. No signature, no name, just proof that a human was here. And that's enough. Now, let the ink settle. Let the page curl softly in the warmth of stillness, like a leaf drifting to rest. You have followed a man through storms and silence, watched his breath become brushstroke, his questions dissolve into dharma. You were not just watching, you were here. Each sound in the night, each drop of rain, each slow turn of the parchment felt not just by him, but by you. And so, as you lie back, let your own breath soften. Notice its rise and fall, the gentle rhythm of a life not needing to prove itself, not needing to grasp, just to be. The candle has burned low now. The story told, the brush cleaned, and you, dear listener, have nothing left to do. No more corrections, no more perfect lines, only rest. Let your limbs grow heavy, like scrolls on a shelf containing wisdom. Yes, but also allowed to simply rest in the dark. Let the teachings copy themselves into your breath, into your sleep, into the dreams that follow. You are the scribe now, but not with brush and ink, with the gentle turning of awareness, the light press of compassion in the chest. If thoughts arise, let them pass like clouds in a monsoon sky. If dreams come, let them be soft and slow, like the final line of a story written by someone who has nothing left to prove. The moon has moved on. The temple bell sleeps. The world is quieter now, and so are you. Sleep deeply. You've earned it. Just as the Chilean gardener placed her final seed beneath moonlit soil, the wind shifts, carrying you gently across oceans and continents until your feet touch warm, red earth beneath an ancient baobab tree. The air here is thick with wood smoke and wild honey. Crickets chirp their quiet mantra as firelight dances on dark skin and dusty drumheads. A boy no older than 12 sits near the fire, his knees drawn to his chest. His name is Kalechi, and tonight, for the first time, he will tell a story not written in any book, but carried in his breath. The elders watch silently, their faces weathered like cliff walls that have withstood 1,000 rains. The fire crackles. Somewhere in the darkness, hyenas yawn and stars blink in sleepy rhythm. The baobab sways with a sound so soft it could be mistaken for memory. Kalechi reaches for the talking drum beside him, its leather worn smooth by the hands of his grandfather. And his grandfather before that. He hesitates, not out of fear, but reverence. Because here, the story is not something to own, it is something to become. He takes a breath, slow and deliberate, in, out, again, until the only thing left is stillness. The drum speaks first, not in words, but in echo. A heartbeat layered over silence. Then Kalechi begins. His voice is low, uncertain at first, like the first steps of a deer unsure of the path. But with each word, his spine lengthens, and the village leans in not just with their ears, but their chests, their breath, their presence. Tonight, he tells the tale of the drum that forgot its song. It begins in a time when drums spoke louder than kings, and one such drum, carved from sacred Iroko wood, lived high in a dusty hut above the savannah. This drum, said to be blessed by the wind itself, was once played by monks who wandered far from Eastern temples, bringing stories of the Buddha to lands where the sun set in fire-colored clouds. But one day, the drum was silent, not broken, not stolen, just quiet. No one knew why. The villagers tried everything: new skins, fresh oil, even songs long buried. But the drum would not sing. Then, one day, a little girl barefoot and curious approached the drum. She didn't strike it. She didn't speak. She just sat beside it, breathing in, out. Her presence was her offering. Hours passed. Then the drum whispered not with sound, but with vibration. A hum like bees before the rain. And when it finally spoke, the story it told was not about gods or warriors or ancient battles. It was about a breath, one breath, and how every breath holds a beginning, a middle, and an end, just like a story. Kalechi pauses. He looks up at the sky, then back to the fire. The village is silent. No one stirs. Even the wind seems to listen. He sets the drum down, carefully, as though it might dissolve into ash if touched too roughly. That, he says softly, was the first story I ever heard. And I didn't hear it with my ears. Then he exhales, long, slow, and steady, and in that breath, something shifts, not in the fire, not in the crowd, but in you. Because now you realize all stories begin where silence ends, and the truest ones are carried on the sound of your breath. The morning arrives, not with fanfare, but with a gentle unraveling, like mist lifting slowly from the river's skin. Birds begin to stir in the neem trees, their songs stitched quietly into the edges of waking. Somewhere nearby, goats bleat sleepily. A rooster tries half-heartedly to be important, and cooking smoke begins to rise in the soft orange light. Kelechi walks alone now. The village still sleeps, but something in him has already begun its own pilgrimage. The talking drum is strapped across his back, its weight familiar, like memory worn into muscle. His bare feet brush through dry grass, past termite mounds and scatterings of acacia blossoms. With each step, the rhythm of his breath keeps time not hurried, not idle, just present. He's looking for someone or something, though no one told him to. The elders only said, if your story begins to echo louder than your own thoughts, walk until the wind sounds different. That was all. So he walks. Hours pass in silence, though silence here is not the absence of sound, but the presence of space. Space for wind and footsteps and the occasional whisper of leaves too wise to gossip. At midday, he finds a man sitting beside a tree that looks more sky than wood. The tree's trunk leans as if bowing to the horizon, its roots curling like sleeping serpents. The man wears no robe, no amulet, no sign of importance, just a shawl of faded indigo and skin darkened by sun and years. His head is shaven. His hands are still. Kelechi stops a few feet away. The man looks up with eyes that don't blink right away. He gestures to the space beside him. Kelechi sits. They do not speak for some time. Instead, they listen to ants passing between their toes, to a breeze threading through thorny branches, to the faint sound of distant drums too far to hear clearly, yet too near to ignore. At last, the man speaks. Voice like sand passing through fingers. You breathe like someone chasing a story. Kelechi nods. And what story does your breath carry? Kelechi thinks. Then finally, I don't know yet, but last night I felt it, like it was living inside me. Not just words, each movement, like a wave that hadn't crested yet. The man smiles with half his face. That's what I thought too, until a monk from the east told me something I never forgot. Kelechi leans in. He said, "The breath is not yours, it's just visiting." Kelechi furrows his brow. But I feel it, right here. He presses a palm to his chest. The man chuckles. Yes, but you also feel the wind on your skin. Is it yours? The boy blinks. The man continues. What if the breath is simply passing through you? Like a guest? What if it's carrying something ancient from one place to another, and for a brief time? You are the house. It stops in Kelechi, looks down at the dirt. He drags a finger through it, tracing circles. Then, I suppose my stories aren't mine either. No. But they trust you to carry them. The man picks up a stick and draws a straight line in the dust. Everything moves. Breath, thought, grief, joy. Nothing stays. He draws another line, perpendicular. But when we breathe mindfully, we notice the moment where everything crosses, where the past doesn't pull and the future doesn't call. A small cross now sits between them in the dirt. The present Kelechi asks, "The only place you ever truly are?" They sit quietly again. A lizard darts past, far off. A jackal cries, though not in pain, more like a laugh that got stuck in its throat. The man closes his eyes. "So, what do you want to do with the breath while it's visiting you?" Kelechi looks up at the sky. As clouds shift like soft promises, "I want to listen better." The man nods. "Good. Then walk until the wind feels like your breath, and the silence becomes your voice." Without another word, he stands and disappears behind the trees, like a mirage politely excusing itself. Kelechi sits a moment longer, then rises. His drum taps softly against his spine as he walks again, this time, not towards something, but within it. By evening, the path narrows. Shadows stretch long like fingers across the ground. A river appears not wide, but deep. He kneels beside it, cupping water to his mouth, then to his ears, then finally to the drum. A single drop lands on the stretched leather skin and echoes, not loudly, but enough. Enough to remind him that sound doesn't have to be strong to be sacred. It just has to be true. That night, Kelechi camps beneath a low fig tree. Fireflies blink in chorus with his heartbeat. He watches the stars again, wondering how many stories are hidden in their stillness. And as his eyes begin to close, one breath flows into another, like a gentle tide folding back into itself. He sleeps without effort, not because the day was simple, but because he no longer needs to understand every step for it to matter. By the time morning comes, the fig tree is already whispering to the sun. A soft golden light stretches across the horizon like a shawl gently placed upon the earth. Dew clings to every blade of grass, sparkling as if the night had quietly wept in contentment. Kelechi is already awake. He sits cross-legged by the river's edge, eyes half closed, spine straight as a drumstick, not meditating, not thinking, just breathing. He doesn't count the breaths. He doesn't chase stillness. He simply lets each inhale arrive, lets each exhale leave, like visitors he trusts to come and go. The talking drum lies beside him, still damp from last night's blessing. Its silence is no longer hollow. It feels full now, full of something invisible, but not absent. Later that morning, he follows the riverbank upstream, where it narrows into smaller tributaries, winding through tall grass and golden reeds. Birds swoop low. Insects rise like mist from the underbrush. The sun climbs higher, but does not burn. It warms like wisdom that doesn't lecture, only invites. He reaches a village he's never seen before. It's quiet, not abandoned, just listening. Smoke curls gently from a single hut. Children play with sticks in the dust, drawing shapes with no intention of permanence. An old woman sits beneath a mango tree, fanning herself with a leaf larger than her head. Her eyes find Kelechi as if she's been waiting. "You've walked far," she says. He nods, unsure how she knows. Maybe it's the dirt on his feet. Maybe it's the way he carries his drum now, not like a tool, but like a story that's no longer trying to be told. The woman taps the ground beside her. He sits. What brings you here, I don't know. She smiles. That's always a good start. They sit together in easy silence. A mango falls nearby, thudding gently in the dirt. She doesn't move to pick it up. Neither does he. It's enough just to notice. After a while, she says, "When I was your age, I also carried a drum." It's still somewhere in this village, buried, not to hide it, just to return it. Kelechi tilts his head. Return it to the silence it came from. She continues, "You see, people think the drum is for making noise, but the wise know it's for hearing the space between the sounds." Kelechi nods slowly. The woman leans closer. "Do you know the most sacred sound in the world?" He shakes his head. She smiles. "It's the one you don't interrupt." They sit for a while longer, listening to birds, wind, children laughing in the distance. When he rises to go, the woman doesn't ask his name, doesn't offer hers, just says, "Keep breathing like that." The world listens to soft breathers. He walks on, not out of obligation, but instinct. The path unfolds without needing to be chosen. Trees part like old friends. Stones roll softly beneath his heels. By dusk, he arrives at a clearing. A circle of travelers, men, women, elders, children sit around a fire, sharing roasted roots and roasted thoughts. He joins them without fanfare. Someone passes him a bowl. Someone else moves aside to make space. No questions, no introductions, just belonging. After the meal, a silence falls, one that's not awkward, but ripe, pregnant with story. They look to him. The drum rests beside his leg. He lifts it, but this time, he doesn't play. He breathes. Once, twice. Then, finally, with the gentlest touch, he taps the drum once soft enough to be mistaken for a heartbeat, and then he speaks. Not loudly, not slowly, just truthfully. He tells a story about a breath, about how it carried a boy across rivers, across silences, across generations of drums and old women and mango trees, about how he once believed stories were made of words, until he realized they are made of space, and he tells them that breath is the first story. The circle listens not just with ears, but with the space between thoughts. And as he finishes, no one claps, no one comments. They simply sit, breath synced, eyes soft, hearts quiet. Somewhere nearby, a baobab stirs, and above them, stars appear one by one, like ancient listeners returning to hear how the story ends. But it doesn't end. It just fades, like a breath returning to where it came from. The night deepens. You lie still now, just like Kelechi beneath the stars. The breath moving through you with the ease of a story that has let go of its need to be understood. No need to hold on. No need to fix anything. Each inhale arrives like a quiet traveler. Each exhale leaves without apology. This is the path, no signposts, no grand finale. Only breath and stillness and the gentle rhythm of letting go. So let your thoughts soften like the sound of a drum in distant hills. Let your body melt into the earth's quiet hands. Let the stories you carry tonight drift where they wish without judgment, without effort, even now, in sleep. The baobab stands tall above you. Even now, the fire crackles. The elders nod. The drum waits patiently beside you. You are not alone. You are simply breathing with the world. Somewhere near the fading edge of the last story, the light dims, and the wind carries the sound of footsteps through narrow stone alleys. You follow them now, your breath quiet, your mind gently loosening. The voices of evening vendors taper into low murmurs as you arrive in a Turkish coastal town where the sky is painted with the pale smoke of 1,000 chimneys, and the smell of fire-roasted chestnuts drifts over rows of tiled roofs. This is where he works. Not yet a master, not yet even a true apprentice, but something softer, a boy on the edge of knowing. The kind of knowing that doesn't live in books or in the voices of teachers, but in the glint of broken pottery and the hush between each heartbeat. His name is Kem. Each morning, before the bazaar wakes fully, Sem opens the shutter of the tile workshop his uncle tends. The iron latch creaks as it lifts, like an old throat clearing before a tale begins. Inside, the floor is dusted with a fine layer of powdered glaze, chalk blue, ember red, the soft shimmer of gold leaf scattered like crumbs of forgotten wisdom. Sem sweeps it all, every morning, slowly, as instructed. You might think it boring, sweeping the same space each day. But Chem doesn't mind. In the scrape of the broom and the swirl of dust, he begins to notice things. The way the morning light filters through warped glass. The way broken pieces glitter more brilliantly than whole ones. The way some tiles, once shattered, reveal a pattern only visible in ruin. He starts to save the shards. At first, just one or two pieces with crescent curves or a sliver of deep cobalt. Then more. His uncle doesn't mind. Waste not, he says, though never with much conviction. Most things in the workshop are already old tools passed down, stencils copied from forgotten books, fire pits sooted with stories. The new things always seem less trustworthy. Shem's favorite task is tracing old patterns onto wet clay. His hand isn't yet steady, but he has the patience for repetition. Today, he's copying a motif of interlocking vines and peacock feathers, delicate, intricate, endless, like thoughts, like karma, like trying to explain why certain lives crack while others don't. There's a bowl of slip beside him, liquid clay for joining the tiles, and it smells faintly metallic, like earth and memory. The room is still, save for the distant echo of calls to prayer drifting from a nearby minaret. The sound folds around him like steam rising from tea. He's never thought of himself as an artist, more like a participant, a vessel. The way some people chant sutras without knowing the words, but feel them ripple anyway. Today, he finds a curved fragment that fits perfectly into the negative space between two larger tiles. He doesn't measure it. He doesn't need to. It clicks in with a sound softer than breath. Later, over lunch, Seem eats lentils and bread with his uncle beneath an archway, tiled in faded azure. His uncle tells him that centuries ago, tile makers believed each crack in a finished piece was an echo of a moment, joy, grief, rage, clarity that had gone unspoken during its creation. The clay remembers, he says. Sem doesn't answer, but he glances at the cracks in the floor and wonders what they remember. That night, after closing shop, he walks home past fountains murmuring in courtyards and cats that appear and vanish like thoughts in meditation. At the fountain near the mosque, he pauses. Water slips down time-worn marble, carving grooves that reflect the moon in broken images. He dips a finger in, tracing the way the light fragments. And just for a second, he feels it, not the meaning, but the moment before meaning, the silence before comprehension, the empty space where the pattern begins. Morning arrives not with trumpets, but with steam. The tile kiln breathes warm clouds into the alley as Sem pushes open the wooden door. Birds scuffle for breadcrumbs along the eaves, and the air smells of charcoal and citrus peel. Another day of repetition, another chance to notice what's been there all along. But today, something has changed. A section of mosaic above the entrance arch has collapsed, no warning, no storm, just a patient surrender to gravity. Dozens of tiles now lay shattered on the workshop floor. Their once seamless geometry crumbled into splinters. Sem stands before the wreckage, broom in hand, unmoving. He knows the design by heart, blue tulips spiraling into 8-point stars, edged in gold. He's traced it 100 times on practice slabs. He's swept beneath it daily, rarely glancing up. Now, he cannot look away. His uncle joins him, eyes narrowed. There's no anger in his face, only the squint of someone measuring the damage not in labor, but in memory. We'll repair it, the older man says, crouching to pick up a larger shard. But it won't be the same. No, Sem says, more to himself, maybe better. There's a silence between them, not awkward, just full, like the pause in a koan, the kind of silence that doesn't need to be solved. Over the next few days, Sem begins the restoration, choosing each piece not to recreate what was, but to honor what has become. He doesn't try to make the cracks disappear. Instead, he leans into them, fitting gold filigree between the breaks, letting empty space breathe between the surviving stars. He remembers what his uncle said about clay remembering moments. If that's true, this wall is now more alive than ever. He begins to think more often about the Four Noble Truths, not the tidy scroll-hanging version, the lived version, the way the Buddha named suffering not as a curse, but as a companion. Suffering exists, not as punishment, just as a condition. That truth seems to hum from each broken tile he lifts. He thinks, too, about karma not as some cosmic scorekeeper, but as a pattern, a repetition of tendencies, like the stencil patterns that ghost over his sketches no matter how many times he tries to change them. What if karma was just a repetition waiting to be recognized and slowly softened? He begins to see his life as a mosaic too, each memory a tile, each regret a crack, each breath a chance to rearrange. In the evenings, he walks through the older parts of the city, where fountains lean and courtyards sink into themselves. He watches how water seeps into cracks and somehow makes the marble smoother, not weaker. He notes how vines grow along broken walls as if grateful for the imperfection. One night, a storm brews low on the horizon. He sits under the overhang of a closed apothecary, watching lightning flash like divine brushstrokes across the sky. Rain begins, first soft, then insistent. And as the downpour batters the tiled street, Sem sees it again, that shimmer of truth in destruction, that wholeness in breakage, that pattern inside chaos. He returns the next day to find the repairs still intact. Some gold leaf has washed away, but the design holds. It is not symmetrical. It does not match the original, but it speaks softly. Honestly, a foreign traveler passing through pauses to admire the repaired arch. Who made this, they ask. Sam shrugs. The wall did. I just listened. Later that day, he's back at his workbench, fitting a chipped shard into a slab of raw clay. The edges don't align. The colors clash slightly, but it fits the silence between his thoughts. And that's enough. The story resumes in quiet, as most true teachings do. Rain has washed the streets clean. The stone gleams, the rooftops drip, and the city seems to inhale more deeply than usual. Sem walks slowly through the morning mist, cloak damp against his back, satchel full of fragments clinking at his side. He's begun collecting them not just to repair, but to understand. Each broken piece he finds holds its own voice, shaped by fire and time and hands that may no longer be living. A chipped green curve whispers of vines that once spiraled across a palace wall. A jagged blue square holds a memory of a minaret's base, weathered by decades of prayer. Sam no longer sees them as ruined. He sees them as witnesses. Back in the workshop, he experiments. He sets the fragments on a slab of clay, not as restoration, but as creation. There's no plan, no final image to aim for, only movement, intuition, attention. He places a red corner beside a black edge, leaves a gap, fills it not with tile, but with gold powder, borrowed from the repair kit his uncle hides behind the kiln. Not to hide the fracture, but to illuminate it. He's heard of the Japanese practice kintsugi, where broken ceramics are mended with lacquer mixed with powdered gold, making the cracks a feature, not a flaw. He doesn't know the word, but he understands the feeling. It's what he's been doing all along. The day stretches long. He loses himself in clay and line, in breath and brushstroke. A glaze bowl tips, then rights itself. A dog barks somewhere far off, and somewhere between applying heat and watching steam rise from the kiln's mouth, he feels something shift. Not dramatic, not lightning, just space. Something that had been tight inside him, maybe a grief, maybe a fear of not being enough, loosens its grip. He doesn't name it. Naming would make it smaller. He steps outside while the glaze cools. Across the street, an old woman hangs wet towels over a railing, humming to herself. A boy carries oranges in his shirt like treasure. A cat eyes him from a rooftop ledge with the wise indifference of all cats who've seen too much. Life goes on. The broken and the beautiful walk hand in hand. He returns to the kiln after dusk. The final tile lies waiting, still hot, still fragile, but whole. Not perfect, never perfect. The red bled slightly into the white. The gold ran too far along one edge, but it glows, and not just because of the materials. It glows because it bears the marks of process, of attention, of failure transformed. He places it gently on the table, palms flat beside it, head bowed, not in worship, but in recognition. This is not just art. This is a mirror, a meditation, a teaching made tangible. Later, he delivers the tile to a small garden shrine, tucking it into a niche between moss-covered stones. No plaque, no announcement, just placement. It catches the moonlight, and for a moment, the moon seems to pause. The garden is quiet. The breeze stills. Even the cicadas soften. And now, listener, so should you. You followed Chem through dust and glaze, through memory and fire. You've watched him move from imitation to creation, from repair to revelation. The teachings were never loud. They never needed to be. Impermanence whispered from each fallen shard. Karma glimmered between every choice of color and placement. And emptiness, the space between fragments, held it all together. You remember now, don't you? The story of the empty boat, drifting without intention, causing anger in the one who thought it manned. But there was no one to blame. Just causes, just conditions, just a chance to release. Sem released his craving for perfection, for symmetry, for praise, and in that found peace. The Buddha once taught that liberation doesn't arrive like thunder. It arrives like exhale, like warm hands on cold clay, like noticing the space between cracks and calling it complete. So now, let your breath ease. Feel your chest rise like a kiln warming slowly before dawn. Feel your thoughts fall like tiles placed one by one. Let silence fill the spaces between them. There is no need to glue yourself back together tonight. Let the broken edges breathe. Let the pattern shift without fear. You are not here to be perfect. You are here to be whole, like Chem, like the tile, like the moonlight glinting across the glaze. Good night.